Surviving my mom's obsessed stalker, a true story. I was 8 years old when I moved from N California to S California. My recently divorced mother and I started our journey by staying with my mom's sister and her husband as well as their toddler child. My mom and I stayed in a room together in their home. Things were going pretty well at first, but then I noticed how mean and degrading my aunt's husband was being towards me. I hated him for this but could do nothing because while I was 8, I remember waking up in the middle of the night next to my mom and my aunt's husband was in the room. I didn't know what to think of it as a kid and simply dismissed it. He sat me down one time, being really nice to me and buying me ice cream and told me not to tell my aunt that he was in the room. Of course I said okay, but on another day my aunt had asked me if I noticed anything weird between my mom and him and I told her he's been in the room in the middle of the night. This is where the story started. It became apparent that my aunt's husband was in love with my mother. My mother refused him completely, at least as much as she could. He became obsessed with her. At this time, my mother and I had moved out to our own place. He would call her and visit her while she was at work or wherever and kept finding excuses to come over to our new home. Eventually, it kept getting worse as my mom refused him. He managed to make a copy of our house key and had broken in a couple of times. At this point, my mom put 5 extra locks on the door to keep him out. He then started to stalk her everywhere she went. One time he showed up to her work asking for her with a bouquet of flowers. The office staff had been notified not to let him on the premises and thus escorted him out via security. He waited for her to get off of work and was waiting by her car begging her to take him. When she refused, he physically assaulted her by grabbing her wrist and slapping her in the face. A coworker of hers heard some hubbub and diffused the situation and he left. My mom told me to stay away from him. One day at school, 4th grade, 9 years, I was waiting for my mom to pick me up after school. I was in the front of the school lot with my friend. He suddenly pulled up and told me that my mom and him are fine now and that she asked him to pick me up. I hesitated and I was kind of scared, but I went along with him anyways. Then I noticed we weren't even going remotely towards my house. We were parking in a Target parking lot and he called my mom on his cell. He told her that he had me and that he wouldn't let me go until she came down to talk to him. I sat there ashamed of being played. She came and my uncle shoved me out of the car and she made me march to hers while they talked and argued. At this point, my mom came back to the car and broke down asking why this was happening. My aunt finally got into the picture and it was time for him, her, and my mom to sit down and talk about this. They locked me and my toddler cousin, their son, in the next room where we could hear everything they were saying. I honestly can't remember what they were saying because my cousin had been crying the whole time. I found out recently, I'm 21 now, that after that had happened and my mom went to go smoke outside, he followed behind her and put a gun to her head. She begged and pleaded, saying, "I have a daughter, please don't do this." He backed off and that was the end of that horrible night. There were a couple nights where we had to stay at motels to keep away from him banging on our doors. The moment I mostly remember, my mom pulled me out of school early, claiming to me that it wasn't safe for me right now. We rushed home in her car, him on the phone with her saying that he was coming over to end it. My mom was hysterical and begged again for him to stop all this. We went into our house, locked every single door and ran upstairs. From the window in her room, we can see the pathway leading towards our house. We watched him get out of his car and start walking towards our door, a large kitchen knife in hand. I was crying so hard while my mom was embracing me, crying as well. She was on the phone with the cops, yelling out the window that she had done so, and after 10 minutes he ran off. Later on we heard that they had gone to his house and arrested him. So after all this bullshit ended, more bullshit emerged. My aunt had begged my mom not to press charges and tried to convince us that he's a good guy. Up to this day, she's still with the bastard. Most likely for financial purposes, but still, really. They're still together. My mom and I are fine, of course, with a restraining order and haven't seen him since then, and they live 30 minutes away. 12 years after that, the incident hasn't affected me much other than my great disdain towards anyone holding a large kitchen knife in my presence. No one else in our immediate family knew about our story. My cousin from a different aunt found out about 3 years ago when we sat her down and told her. My grandmother found out last year and from then on does not even mention his name. The one thing that kills me about all this is that my grandfather, who I respect and love more than anyone, has no clue and he loves the guy. He suffered a stroke about 1.5 years ago, so we really haven't bothered to tell him. P.S. I know it's a long post, but I've never written nor told anyone this story, so I wrote as much as I could. Some details are still missing, but there isn't a lot of time and energy to put into it today. Edit. I sincerely appreciate all the feedback, guys. Thank you so much. A lot of you have recommended I post to /r/let's not meet. And because of that I did.